In the heart of Kaduna, where the dusty winds carried the call to prayer and the scent of roasted groundnuts lingered in the air, a young boy named Aliyu watched his mother, Adiza, beg for alms under the shade of a mango tree. Her wrapper was faded, its vibrant patterns long surrendered to time and hardship. Her hands trembled as she stretched them towards strangers, traders, tired commuters, whispering,
"Da Allah, give me something small."
Her voice barely above the rustle of the dry leaves above her. She kept her gaze low, her face half covered by the edge of her veil, trying to hide the shame that burned behind her eyes. Beside her sat Aliyu, barefoot and silent, his knees hugged tightly to his chest. His stomach growled from a hunger that had become a constant companion. His eyes were dry from too much crying, their innocence dimmed by the weight of things no child should carry. Aliyu leaned against his mother's bony frame, her ribs rising and falling with each labored breath. He remembered a time when her hands were strong, when her laughter filled the room they used to call home, before sickness came, before Baba left and the roof caved in during the last raining season. Now every day was a slow march through dust and desperation, the city's noise a background to their quiet suffering. Above them, the mango tree offered shade and nothing more. Its fruit had been picked clean by early risers or street boys with slingshots. But still, it stood, tall and stubborn, a silent witness to lives unfolding beneath its branches. One day, a passerby slowed his steps near the mango tree. He was a middle-aged man in a worn kaftan, his face lined with the fatigue of the day. As he looked down at Adiza and Aliyu, something in the boy's hollow gaze pierced him. Without a word, he reached into his pockets, pulled out a few crumpled naira notes and dropped them gently into the old calabash bowl. Then, almost to himself, he muttered,
"Send this boy to Makaranta. He should not waste on the streets."
Adiza's eyes followed the man as he walked away, his words ringing louder than the call to prayers echoing from the nearby mosque. Her fingers clutched the money like it was sacred, not because of its value but because of the possibility it carried. That night, as they lay coiled beneath the mango tree, with nothing but a frayed wrapper between them and the chill of the earth, Adiza held Aliyu close. She whispered prayers into his ears, her voice frail and tired, but steady with faith.
Alayat Meikeka, Aliyu, you will learn God's word. You will not die in dust like me. You would not live on the mercy of strangers forever. There is more for you. Wallahi, there is more.
She kissed his forehead, her lips dry and warm. Aliyu didn't say much. He was used to her prayers, used to the weight of dreams too big for their tiny world. But that night, her words felt different, final, like a door softly closing. He held her hand and listened as her breathing slowed, then steadied. And then, sometime before the first lights broke across the rooftops of Kaduna, it stopped. By morning, she was gone. The sun rose gently, spilling golden light through the mango leaves and warming the dust. People passed as they always did, but now they saw something different. A small boy coiled beside the still body of his mother, their bowl knocked over, its coins scattered like forgotten hopes, and the mango tree stood above them, bearing silent witness once more. Aliyu sat still for hours, too numbed to cry, until someone called the authorities. He didn't understand the murmured condolences or pitying looks. All he knew was that his mother's hand no longer squeezed his, and her voice no longer whispered hope into his ears. Days later, a distant relative arranged for him to be sent to Zaria to live with Malam Jibril, a stern-bearded teacher with a sharp eyes and a voice like thunder. The compound where Aliyu now lived was nothing like home. It was a cramped, dusty yard enclosed by mud brick walls, housing over 30 boys who slept shoulder to shoulder on raffia mats, their heads shaved, their sandals worn thin. There was no laughter there, only the murmur of memorized verses and the occasional crack of a cane. Learning came with hunger. Before dawn, the boys were roused for prayers, then spent the rest of the day hunched over wooden slates, carefully scratching out letters with charcoal and reciting it by firelight. Their throats were dry from repetition, their bellies empty. Food was not given, it was earned through begging. With bowls in hand, the boys wandered the streets of Zaria, markets, motor parks, mosque entrances, calling out, hoping for scraps or coins. Aliyu hated it. He hated the cold stares, the muttered insults from passers-by, the way shopkeepers waved him off like a fly. He hated the sting of slaps from strangers and the shame that came with stretching out his hand again and again. Sometimes he returned to the compound with nothing, his feet blistered, his stomach groaning, and when sickness came, as it did often, it was met with indifference. Fever burned through him once, for days, and no one noticed. He lay coiled in a corner, shivering on a raffia mat, watching the shadows dance on the wall, praying not to die like his mother, alone and forgotten. Nights were the worst. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wall, and the thin blanket offered little warmth. Aliyu held on to one thing, his whispered vow. Every night, with chapped lips and clenched fists, he said it like a prayer.
I will never beg again. Never.
And then, one morning, just after his 10th birthday, he didn't pick up his bowl. He slipped through the wooden gates before dawn, barefoot with nothing but his slates and his mother's memory. Aliyu ran away, nothing but the clothes on his back and a head full of stubborn dreams. The school had become too bitter, too tight around the neck. He boarded a truck headed for Kaduna and rode for hours beneath a tarpaulin sheet. The engines roared, drowning out his fears. When he arrived in Kaduna, hungry and alone, the city stretched before him, wide, unfamiliar, bustling with urgency and smoke. It was near the central market that he met Baba Musa, an old cobbler with cloudy eyes and hands that stitched like memory. Baba Musa didn't ask questions. He saw the hunger in Aliyu's eyes, the ache in his bones. He handed the boy a crust of bread and a stool beside his workbench. Sit, watch and learn. Aliyu's first days were filled with pain. His soft finger blistered from pulling coarse thread and hammering soles into shape. The glue stung his nose. The thread bit into his palm, but he endured. He watched how Baba Musa spoke to each customer with dignity, even when they tossed their worn sandals at his feet without thanks. He listened, he learned, and in time, his hands grew strong. He walked through Harmattan dust, raining season floods. Sometimes the police would come, chasing off hawkers and petty traders from the roadside. Each night, under the flickering street lights near their shared corner, Aliyu would open torn pages of old school books, scavenged from refuse heaps. Baba Musa had once taught in a village school, and he guided the boy's trembling fingers across letters and signs, making sure Aliyu could spell his name with pride. One day, Aliyu whispered to himself, I will own a shop with my name on the front. The turning point came when the fabric trader, Alhaji Tanko, noticed the boy's hustle and honesty. He handed Aliyu a bundle of leftover Ankara fabric and said, try selling these, bring back what you can. Aliyu took to the streets. With color in his hands, he learned the feel of wax prints, the difference between real Dutch fabric and cheap imitations. He memorized the colors women loved for weddings, the patterns that moved fastest before Salah. He went from saloon to stall, holding up samples of his polythene bags, smiling with confidence. Customers began to ask for him by name. He was no longer just the cobbler's boy. He was Aliyu, the Ankara seller, the one who knew how to match a bride's complexion with the perfect fabric. At 18, with savings folded neatly in a rusted biscuit tin, Aliyu rented a small wooden kiosk. He painted the sign himself in shaky white letters, Aliyu Fabrics and Sons, though he had no sons yet. Only dreams and the memory of a cobbler who once fed a runaway boy. Inside the shop, he hung his fabrics like trophies, bold red, royal blues, earthy browns. Each one told a piece of his journey. When customers entered, he greeted them with the same respect Baba Musa had taught him. And when little boys came to linger by the door, hungry-eyed and barefoot, he handed them scraps of bread, just like the old man had once done for him. And then he met Zainab, a soft-spoken school teacher who wore a bright green hijab that made her eyes shine even brighter. She had seen him sitting outside his small fabric kiosk, scribbling clumsily on a scrap of paper. Curious, she approached him and asked gently,
Did you ever go to school?
Aliyu smiled, a little embarrassed, and replied,
No, life was my classroom.
They began to talk day after day. She passed by bringing books, newspapers, and snacks. Over time, her presence became the light in his dusty days. She taught him to read and write, starting with the alphabet, then the newspapers he once only used to wrap goods. For the first time, he read his own name. She encouraged him to dream bigger. With her help, Aliyu registered his business, applied for small grants, and opened a larger fabric shop. Together, they selected bold patterns and rare textiles that attracted more customers. She managed the books. It charmed the buyers. Within 2 years, they were married. Within 5, they were running a small textile distribution center and training orphans in tailoring skills. Now in his 30s, Aliyu wears clean kaftans, speaks fluent Hausa and English, and travels to schools, mosques, and youth centers across northern Nigeria. Whenever he stands in front of a crowd, he starts with a quiet smile and says,
I was a beggar, a cobbler, a street hawker. I know the taste of hunger, the cold of rejection, the shame of being ignored. The world gave me dust, but I built a house from it.
Children listened with wide eyes and teachers took notes. He never forgets to tell them,
Not every child is as lucky as I was. The Almajiri system, once built for dignity and knowledge, is now broken. Children deserve more than memorizing verses and sleeping hungry on street corners.
He ends every talk with the same plea.
If you see a boy with a bowl, don't just drop a coin. Ask his name, hear his story, and give him a future.